Steven.
Yeah. Welcome. What a day we have for you today. 3 guys, many games. I'm your host, Steve Sombrato. I'm here with my big brother, Vincent, the GOAT, and Levittown's own Rob Smalley, who
Levittown's on. There he goes.
we now refer to as Mr. Chaminade. Somehow he left Levittown in the dust.
Yeah, he's Mr.
And now he's Mr. Chaminade now. Rob Smalley. And our special guest today, a very dear friend for many, many years. I know we're going to get a lot into all of the ins and outs of this great Mineola, great gone to Brown, on to club ranks, on to Team USA. We're going to get into it all today. Our friend, Darren Lowe.
Yeah.
Let's get some cheering going. Welcome, Darren. I'm excited to have you today.
Super humbled to be here with you guys. Love watching your show.
This is
and your trail of guests is incredible. So to be included with them is awesome.
Well, I think a lot of times that we talk all the various characters in lacrosse, I think this is great because I think that people probably don't, really I want them to get to know you because a lot of people don't know you. I think even the guys who played with you don't really know some of the things about you. And I think that's important to get out there because you were such a great player, such a great guy over the years. And I think for all the people out there, I'd like them to learn a lot of the great things that I learned about you over the years from when we got to know each other. But I always let Vinny, I know he always likes to go over the early days details.
Yeah, I like to.
Where's he from, Vinny? Where's he from and where's he
go
going?
back to the roots. I like to go where you got started. I mean, obviously, between you and your brother Kevin, you're both Hall of Famers, but you come from a family. Your dad's a Hall of Famer and legendary Manhasset coach. We were talking about it just before you came on. Your dad coached with Jack Cayley, right, at East Meadow, and coached some of the great coaches of today. John Danowski played for your dad there. Yeah, Richie Werner, who was a USA player, Mickey Mena, Donovan, the big defenseman who ended up, he's on TV, does the games. I mean, you got so much history coming out. Rich Morty, who played football at Penn State. I think they all were playing while your dad was there until he moved over to Manhasset. And then, of course, his moving into Manhattan, I think, didn't he win the county championship the first year he coached? Am I right about that?
First 2 years with John Driscoll.
He won back-to-backs. That's my era, with the great John Driscoll. May he rest in peace. But, the Lowe name, of course, past that, his coaching prowess, he was an All-American, first-team All-American, the whole bit at University of Maryland. He was a phenomenal player, played on the 74 U.S. team?
74.
Right? 74 U.S. team. So, between you and your brother Kevin, you just kind of followed suit. You had great genetics and you had a great coach right in your house. So you guys were kind of, and with your athleticism, you were kind of surefire guys. But you grew up in East Williston, right?
Williston Park,
that's considered. So, I guess you either could have you went to Mineola because you must have been on some kind of boundary between that and Wheatley or something, maybe, right?
Well, Wheatley didn't have lacrosse, but we were considering renting a place in Manhasset to play for Manhasset when I went to high school. That was one of the things we considered. But you think about the legacy of that area, right? You had Ryan Wellner and Chris Woj on from Notre Dame as one of your first podcast guests. Ryan Wellner delivered bagels from Claudio's bagel shop, Bagel Express, on Hillside Avenue. He'd spend his money, I think, at Hildebrand's. He'd ride his bike past our house growing up. And Claudio was a classmate of John Danowski and played for my dad in high school. The world is pretty small when you think about Long Island lacrosse.
Yeah, it's really crazy how, these lines cross and, And the fact that you at such a high level for so long, and you've played with so many different guys, but so you're at Mineola, which was far from a powerhouse lacrosse team back in the day. I don't know if they've ever been, I don't know how far they've ever gotten, but you and your brother Kevin obviously raised the level there as players. But will you just tell us about, you actually had to play against your dad?
Yeah, so like Mineola was an interesting place, right? Because it had a good tradition back in the 50s and 60s of good athletics. But I think when Kevin and I played high school my last year, we had 13 kids on the team. So I would face off, take a break on attack, play midfield, play long stick on defense, when we were man down. And all those things really helped, from an IQ perspective in lacrosse. And my dad always had this saying, like, know your personnel, don't throw it to someone who can't catch. So, we would throw it to each other, but we had some unbelievable players. Richie Flynn played goalie, played for Tobey. He started playing goalie in our backyard. When we were a kid, we knew we needed a goalie. Devin Beresheim played at UPenn. So we had some good players.
Yeah, you had some athletes. I mean, listen, you got two Hall of Famers out of Mineola, maybe at least two. You got Jack Emma, right? He went to Mineola, I believe. Coach
Stan
Emma.
the man, right?
Stan
Stan the man.
Kowalski.
My
And,
coach.
I'm not sure if Richie Mead went to Mineola, I think also, didn't he?
He did.
Richie Mead, Coach
Richie
Richie
Mead taught me life lessons.
So, there definitely is a history, but in terms of winning county championships or any of those things, like you just said, having 13 kids come out for a team.
Well, what was the furthest? What was the furthest you got in high school? How did it end up in high school?
I think the county quarters. We never played at Hofstra, but every year we played in the county quarters. We lost in overtime twice, with a chance to go. Heartbreaking, But Vinny, we got to play Manhasset, and my first year playing Manhasset, I think I was a 108-pound freshman, just getting thrown around, and we lost like 19-2. The next year we lost 20-4. My junior year we beat them, in overtime. I think 13, 12, and I had almost all of the 13 points, and Devin Beresheim had the reverse of the 13 points, And I always say we beat them 1 out of 8 times, but that we won. Right. That didn't happen in like 50 weeks, So all those things, like I think that you watch all these kids today congregate to the same high school and have to win, or congregate to, like, there's something valuable for having to do as much as possible on the lacrosse field. Because when I got to college, things were easier because everybody could catch, everybody could cut, everybody had IQ. First at Brown, everybody's really smart. And then you get to Long Island, when I played with you guys, it was like next level athletic, intelligence and the demand of each other. And so, Stephen, it's really interesting. Like, some of my teammates didn't get to know me. I don't know if they liked me too much, other than I threw them the ball. Like,
yeah. Well, let me ask you this: was you obviously had the academics because you ended up at Brown? Was we have Mr. Chaminade on here, so was Chaminade? It's in Mineola. Was that ever a consideration?
Yeah, I want to bring that up. If he was so smart, why didn't he get into Chaminade?
So,
he automatically assumes he couldn't get into Chaminade.
I didn't say. There they go again. I said, if he was smart, wouldn't he consider Chaminade? That's what I said.
No question. I think, we knew it was out of our economic realm of an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And I think that my father was really, really pushing us to play as many sports as possible. And I think at Chaminade, you kind of couldn't do that because I played basketball and soccer. Kevin played quarterback, and Kevin played quarterback at Princeton for a year. So basketball, we played together also. And those things in high school were awesome. I don't know if I would have gotten to experience them. And I think academically, you learn about yourself as you grow. I don't know if I could have handled Chaminade as a 14-year-old kid. Like, I respect the heck out of those kids who are there right now. It's a tough, demanding place. Like, I don't think I was emotionally ready to do that. And I will tell you, like, when I went to Brown, I was scared out of my mind. I wasn't prepared. So it made me work extra hard when I got there. And I just didn't want to fail. So all those things, like, paths get taken on decision trees. That's kind of the way I always look at life. And we chose one branch and it worked. And my dad trusted the process and wanted to put us in the people don't use the word Rolodex anymore, but close to as many people who could help us in life. And I think the Manhasset community, most people who meet me outside of, Mineola or Long Island think that I went to Manhasset where my dad coached. So like, we never tell them otherwise because that community and that network is phenomenal. You guys know that Port area, like that's just super successful people in life. And we're proud to be associated with them, even as tangent.
Well, let me ask you. So now, obviously what year did you get out of high school?
1988.
So you're 88. The recruiting started to get a little different from when I was in school. I'm in the 70s. Who was recruiting you and when were they recruiting you and what made up your mind to attend Brown?
Yeah. So, I mean, I watched so much lacrosse. I watched lacrosse, when Post was playing somebody, Adelphi was playing somebody, the games at Manhasset, we knew everybody was going. I think, a lot of Manhasset kids were going to Princeton at that time and were starting to, but they weren't winning at all. I think Princeton before I went to college was one and forever in the Ivy League, before Bill Tierney went there. Brown had a guy named John Keogh, who was a Manhasset guy, who was the CEO of Chubb. I loved watching him play growing up. I thought I could play like him, and I followed him there. And that's kind of where the other schools that, I was really interested in was Cornell, because they were running an offense with Tim Goldstein, who was going to graduate the year before I got there, that I thought I could fit into it, fit me, the way they ran their offense. And I knew it was cheaper to go to the state school for my parents because my brother was really much better academically than I was in high school. And Richie Moran, he didn't have interest. Thought I was small. Told me, if I wanted to save money, I should go to Oneonta or Oswego, and put a big chip on my shoulder. I looked at Virginia. I just didn't think Virginia was right for me. And my dad and I had a super sit down with the legal pad and said, if you want to go to Virginia, it's going to be this much cheaper because of the scholarship money. And if you want to go to Brown, you're going to get no money. Right. And this is how much you need to make every summer. This is how much you need to contribute in financial aid, and you need to take on these loans, and you're going to need to pay them off because we got to provide for your brother as well. So you got to grow up and you got to get a job. And my dad, my dad spoke to Dom Starja. I worked, Peninsula Boulevard for Pacone Construction, grinded for summers and winters, and cleaned backhoes and and such with did all the grease with a power washer. That was my job. I delivered any supplies on machinery that had broken down to like JFK or to the West Side Highway. And those were my summer jobs for 4 years. And those jobs, like other kids were lifeguarding, or other kids were spending at Brown in particular, were spending, the winters in the Bahamas. I was grinding away, and it just kept me a focus on what I wanted to do the rest of my life.
Did Dom Starja give you the keys to the offense from when you got there, or what was that like coming in as a freshman?
So we had a really good group. I kind of knew Brown was a good spot because they had two attackmen who had graduated, and we had a senior attackman, Jamie Monroe, and I was deferring a lot my first couple games. I think, Stephen, we played post and I deferred, and Dom knocked on my door at 6:00 after a loss to Yale, a 3:00 game. We lost in overtime to Yale. John Reese scored a goal. And when I was a freshman, he came by my dorm and I was ready to go eat dinner. We walked around campus for 2 hours. And he told me that I'm never taking you out. This is your team for 4 years. We're riding with it. And just go be you. And talk to me about life. Talk to me about trying to get out of making sure he knew it was comfortable to get out of my dad's shadow, which I never had a problem with. I always embraced that. I think that, for you guys who played with me, like I had a kid in the backyard that I was throwing the ball with all the time that I knew was awesome, right? I was more in his shadow, and he's 2 years younger because I knew how good he was.
Did you become better than the teacher? Were you better than the teacher? Be humble. You can say it.
I'll let other people describe. I'll let other people argue that.
But you got to that level of like the teacher. You okay? So
Yeah,
that's
I
good.
mean,
That's
I
a good thing.
my father was extremely proud of how we did athletically and academically, and he let us grow and let us be mentored by other people, and he was really selfless that way. And that's
Well,
hard as
listen, you had the right guy in Dom. You had the right guy in Dom Starsia that put that trust in you. He saw something in you special. You got to be a little lucky at times, to have the right coach, that can identify those things. So you got to give Dom a lot of credit for that, and that he was able to let you flourish.
Yeah, I was really attracted to Brown because Mike Caravana, Sewanaka legend, was at Brown as the offense coordinator, and like he was a camp counselor of mine when I was 7 or 8 years old. Like that's who I thought I wanted to go play for. Then he switched to go be the assistant at Virginia when I was a senior. So I was kind of torn. Like, should I go with him? What would that look like? And but it worked out great at Brown. Like
Well, my first recollection of meeting Darren, really, or kind of coming across Darren for the first time, and this again, my memory is a little fuzzy because I don't know that we played you when would have been a freshman. For some reason I don't have a recollection of that game, but I do, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was that year and not the following year, but I do remember where we played you up at Brown, and for whatever reason we were in that field house, and that big kind of field house where track is going on, and guys were getting ready before the game, and I saw you over there, and I'm like, oh, this kid's skinny like me, and guys, I could heard all defensemen already, like, oh, I want to beat on that guy. I go, I don't know. He looks pretty fast. That kid looks, I go, look at his stick, though. Look at that crazy stick he's playing with. It looks like a tennis racket. Is he going to play racquetball or play lacrosse, But you guys torched us that day. It was like, forget it. We maybe hung in for a couple minutes, and then you could see between Andy Towers and Darren and Jay McMahon, there was a lot of pieces there that was a very, very good team. We weren't going to be able to hang. And then the Brown, well, I don't think he was there quite yet for that game, but the Brown fans were getting all over Tommy P in that game. And they were chanting. They had a full side of the stands chanting, "The coach is smoking. The coach is smoking."
Referring to Tom, the great legend Tommy Postel.
It was great.
Wait, Steven, hold on. For the fans, what are you actually saying?
Well, Tommy Postel, my coach, we were playing Brown. It was windy, blustery up there a little bit at that time of the year, and he was smoking his cigarettes on the sideline like he always did. And the fans, they were known, Brown, to have a heckling sort of section, and they were all over it, and they were all over our guys too.
He was crazy. He burnt my jacket one time. He flicked a cigarette into my jacket. Remember they had the jackets with the down in it,
right?
Burnt the whole of my whole jacket. Only jacket I had.
But like Darren says, it is a small world because Tommy's my coach. Tommy played with Alan Lowe, Darren's father, on Long Island for many years. So it's like these circles on the U.S. team. So it's constant circles interacting. But that was my first, I got to kind of briefly meet you there, and then we played at Post. At Post, we gave you a much better game. That was my senior year. That was tight for a while, and then you kind of extended on us. I think you guys were all sick. That was the thing going on there. Everybody was like strep throat going through the whole team or something, and we were able to hang in a little bit more in that game. But I always knew that I saw him as a special player. I was like, man, this guy is just controlling the game. He's definitely the quarterback. He's running the show for them. And they were, during those years, clearly you were a very strong team. You did run into some buzzsaws with Syracuse, a few of those years, but, you did have great success at Brown. There's no question. I don't look at that as, I think, what was the furthest? Quarters was the furthest? Or?
Quarters.
But you sort of laid the foundation because shortly after, I think Dave Evans's crew and they got to the Final Four at least one year, right?
They did. They
You know,
played
so
against Princeton. They played against my brother's team that won the national championship. Yeah.
right. You know, so that
But
was like
Darren, you never got into the finals, right? At the final game.
No, and I hear it all the time at dinner here at my house or in my brother's house.
How much weight do you put on yourself when in reflection back in the day? I mean, because it's a personal thing. When you know you got to reflect on yourself. Did you blame yourself at all for not making it to the finals? Thought you could have did something different?
Oh, definitely. It left chips on the table. I think we were a junior. You know, we were number 2 in the country and undefeated, and we
Oh my
lost to
God!
Maryland at home, and Brown had rolled in like an extra 3,000 stands for the playoff game,
What?
and the place was unbelievable. And I always say, like, it was the best day I ever had at Brown and the worst day I ever had at Brown.
I
You know,
got
holy Steve Kavovit had 30. I think it's still an NCAA record. Had the most saves ever. Like, we peppered him. We just couldn't put it in. And do I think I could have thrown a better backside pass 1 or 2 times? Yeah.
that was against who? That was
Maryland.
Maryland.
Yeah.
Right.
Darren, were you able to play right, or was the pressure so super? You had family there. Did it get to you, or you were so into the game? Were people asking for tickets, like like all kinds of distractions? Because a lot of times that has a lot to do with it.
No, nothing. None of that stuff. I think I was so insulated on all that stuff.
Oh, so that's good then, yeah. Hey,
But
that's how it
but
happens.
but Smalls, here's where Smalls will learn something. So after Darren finished an unbelievable career at Brown, and I think you might have were you the all time assist leader leaving Brown, like
points leader, that's for
or
sure. He's
points
all-time points leader.
for the NCAA at the time when you finished, you were the all time points leader.
I was second behind Tim Nelson.
Tim Nelson, but you were assists. You were the lead, or
I think it was
yeah, I thought
At
so.
Brown, he held all the records.
in the NCAA at that time.
Wait, Vinny, say that again. Vinny made a point. What?
No, I was saying at Brown, he was their all-time point scorer. At
Yes,
Brown.
but he was also the all-time NCAA assist leader leaving Brown. So he was, does heavy-duty points
Wow.
leaving
That is
Brown.
impressive.
And when he came out, at this time, I'm already, I'm a year ahead of him, so we got a little Long Island going on, and during those years, we struggled a little bit. We lost to Bryan the first couple of years that I was playing club, and we didn't even make the championship game. And then I think it was 94 we won. We'd beaten Darren with New York AC, and we won, but we won the championship that year. And then 95 we had beaten New York AC, but we got slaughtered down in Maryland against Mount Washington. And I felt at that time, I was like, wow, we definitely trying to figure out the pieces. And I got a call. This was where it all kind of reconnects. In 95, I got a call from Teddy Bauer, and he called me and he asked me to come out to Vail to play with Mount Washington. And he said, "Oh, a lot of guys on the team, Darren. We got some Long Island guys. We got our, guys from Maryland. It's a good mixture. Come out and play with us." So I went out, and that's when I kind of reconnected with Darren at that time. And I know there was some disappointment that he hadn't, he tried out and hadn't made the world team for that 94 team. And I said, well, you want to make that team, you come over and play for Long Island, come with us. And you're going to you're going to fill the pieces. And I also knew in the back of my head that if Darren came, Kevin was going to come too. So I thought that was a good shot at that. And preparing for that 96 season after Vail, Darren and Kevin came over, and that was a changing point, I think, for Long Island for sure. What were your thoughts about making that switch?
Well, my dad had played for Long Island. We definitely felt like we were under supported at the World Team tryouts in '93 for the '94 team. I think there's been like three guys who had been the NCAA Player of the Year the previous year who had not made the team, and I'm one of them. So I felt like I had a lot of gas in the tank, and knowing that was my ultimate goal. I also saw like how good the Long Island guys were when we played against them, how much into it everybody was, what people put the time into the process. And Kevin was like, I'm not going to go back there. Like, he was really, after you called, he was like, I'm going to go to Long Island. Darren, like we need to go there. And boy, like the lacrosse we played for the next 5 years was ridiculous there.
Darren, how old are you now? How old are you?
I am 54 right now.
Oh, so you're a lot younger than these characters here.
Not
Wow.
Steven. Steven's 56. But let me ask you, Darren. So wait a minute. 96 was your first year on Long Island?
First year, yeah, when we beat Toyota down
Wow.
at
So you came. I didn't remember. I thought maybe you played in '95, but so when you came on with Kevin, we did that three-peat. We won
Yeah,
'96,
right away.
'97, '98,
Yep.
and so yeah. And then I think we lost Kevin in '99, right?
yeah, he was working in at Merrill in Los Angeles.
Right.
He
He
was
had moved out
he
to
was away then.
California. Yeah. Yeah, and we lost
We lost.
two critical
We lost
pieces.
Sal too.
We lost Sal. We lost Kevin and Sal. So that was we finally got beat by Toyota. They beat us down at UMBC, I think it was. But so you play on this Long Island team. We do a three-peat, and now you go out again for the U.S. team '97 to play in the games in '98, and you make the team. And not only make the team, that's a team that it's coached by Bill Tierney, who coached your brother in college, right? Now, why was
What year are we talking? What year?
98.
I just said '98. Why?
This is his
Kevin on
first
that team? I'm not remembering.
Sorry, Vin.
Why was
Kevin
Kevin not
Kevin
on
did
that?
not make that team.
Say again?
Kevin did not make that team.
Yeah.
Is this the first year you're trying out for the team or second? 90.
Second
No.
time.
Second time.
Okay.
So, I didn't realize if he even tried out, but it would have been a natural for you guys to play together. So now you play in '98. Kevin's not on that team, and it's one of the greatest games in world lacrosse. Double overtime, I guess that's how it was played then. Down in Baltimore, I was there. U.S. sprinted out to a big lead. Canada came back. You went into overtime, and you scored what turned out to be the winning goal on a pass from Ryan Wade right off a face-off, I think it was.
Face-off, quick stick.
Yeah, I remember you doing the high knees after scoring.
What was the final score? The final score of that game?
I think it was 14-13.
Wow, one goal. Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know where the high knee celebration came from. I think, I see that and I'm like, I just know there was a lot of emotion that came out of my body.
It was in Canada?
I actually thought it was higher than that. I thought it was like 18-17 or something like
Wow.
that. It was a high-scoring game, but I do remember, what I didn't realize, I had looked it up after, and Sal Lacasio, he had an incredible game. He had like 30-something saves, which the Canadian goalie, that's another guy, passed away. He was a great player. He played at Virginia. What was that kid's name?
Chris Sanderson.
Chris Sanderson.
Yeah. Everybody loved him, and he had a great game. I mean, he probably had 20-something saves, but Sal was unbelievable, and that was really, I think that also launched Dave Morrow's Warrior into space. Being he was the main sponsor of those games, and it was so well attended and watched all over. So now you get your first gold medal with that. It's a great experience. Moving forward, within the next 3 years, you play in the exhibition games, which of these games that were going to turn into what was the MLL, right? The Pro League. And obviously you would have been a first round pick how they did the draft, and Kevin also and all, but you made a real conscious decision to stay with the U.S. team because that year they limited, they wouldn't allow guys who played in the Pro League to play for Team USA. So people had to make choices, and there were a lot of guys who were on the team in '98 who chose not to play for the U.S. team, and
That's interesting.
instead decided to play for the country, which, it was, I think some people, I think a lot of people knew you'd have a good team, a very good team, and, but Canada was pretty loaded. Paul, I think, played for Canada. He didn't play for MLL, but Gary played with us that year, so he was out. So it was a little scary, but, tell us about that, knowing that, a little bit of a younger type team for a national team. And now you're coming off the one before, making all world and scoring the winning goal. And you really had to play more of a leadership role. I mean, you could still play great, but I mean, you also had to really step up in a leadership role for that team.
Yeah, I think that that 98 game that you were talking about, that wasn't like the most fulfilling event. Like there was a lot of emotion that came out, but we didn't I don't think I performed at the level on that team the way I wanted to, even though it was all world. I felt like I had more to give. And I also knew that Kevin was not there with me. And I was hoping a couple other people who had not played, you know, a name that would have maybe made that choice with us. Like that would have been really, really cool. The team was really young, but it was also an interesting time in the world, right? When we had the team selected a month later, 9/11 hit.
Right.
And it was an emotional time. We had some guys who were Secret Service people, Todd Rassis. We had some people who were, dads were police officers, coached a lot in New York. It was impactful. And, I was working on Wall Street, and my brother, was uh, working at a building right across the street from the World Trade Center, and, ran out, dodging bodies, running out of the building. And a month later, we're wearing the USA jerseys with the national anthem playing. I'm not really sure, like, there was anything more that was like, it was just amazingly different. But when we went to Australia, Jack Emmer was the coach. I think that was a bond because he went to high school with my mom, that we had. And
A
I just felt
Mineola guy, and also came full circle because your dad played in Australia, didn't he, with the world
like,
team?
I played in Australia. And Kevin, made the decision to opt out of the MLL for that year and play. And, we had an unbelievable family experience, but you guys know you got to win. Like, if you don't win when you're on Team USA, you're slightly, the legacy is not the same.
Right.
And Vinny, I will tell you, like, I had a reporter like the day before the World Final come up to me and said, "Hey, Darren, you've had a great career. Will this end?" I said, "I think this is my last game tomorrow. Where do you put your career, and like how will you rank in it?" And I actually remember thinking to myself, well, if we win, I've done half of what Vinny's done.
I don't know about that. Well, maybe just with world teams, maybe, but
And but I also knew like there was a Long Island legacy to that team. You had to perform. And Smalley, like your answer to the question before is like it was demanded that you perform when you played in those type of games. And I felt like where we grew up, that was just part of the culture. You saw so much good Long Island lacrosse. You saw how people put time into the process, and you saw how they delivered. Like I remember watching a game Bob Boniello played against Hopkins.
There he is.
Right?
My man, Bonzo.
I remember watching, Tim Goldstein. They lost to Hopkins in the championship, but the game he had was unreal, right? And I remember watching Roddy Marino when I was playing on the USA development team, playing against the US team that you were on, Vin. I think that was probably the 90 team.
Mhm.
Watching Roddy play, right? And so you kind of knew what was expected. You're just one more, and we've seen it with Rob Pennell since. We've seen it with other players, and I think it's a legacy. Matt Danowski, I can tell you, we were part of the selection group. I ran the committee for the team that went to Israel, and Vin, you were on that. Matt, it was Matt's time to be a leader on that team, right?
Right.
He was amazing career. He scored a goal, I think, in the first Canadian game to win the game from the outside, and I could see his body, on TV. I was not there, but like shake with that emotion. Like I knew what that was like. There was some bond that we all have together,
Yeah.
And when we were playing Long Island Hofstra, like we were winning 19-0, and if you didn't make the right pass down the side or cut properly, you heard about it, right?
Well, it's the pressure. I mean, I think that's the thing with Long Island Lacrosse Club is I felt it especially when I first came onto the team and we didn't win, and I'm like, if it's a different kind of pressure for teams that say, okay, we want to have a good season of that, or it really was like if you didn't win the championship, it was bust.
Yeah.
You know,
But
that
you're right,
was a
Stephen.
disappointment. So, I mean, you're going from the 80s where, you know, you're not going to win every championship game. I used to say I would always more
except if you're
nervous.
Smalley. He's the only guy I
Yeah,
know.
he is.
He was 2 years with Long
That's
Island.
right.
He won 2 championships.
That's right. That's it. Smalley's undefeated. But
Thank you for that. I will say, Vinny, once I'm sorry, Steven. He would tell me at night all the game. He never liked one of his biggest pet peeves. He hated if USA lost. It drove him crazy. He would study the film, this character, film after film after film. I go, Vinny, fact check it. He fact checked it. The guy had the ball. The guy, every little detail. I've never seen anybody like it in the game like Vincenzo. I can't stand him half the times I talk to him. We argue about a lot of things, but I have to say his time and his effort for perfection in the game is really incredible. Go ahead. I don't want to take time.
I would always get more nervous in the semifinal games. You're in the final game. You're not going to win every championship you're playing, but at least you're not watching anybody play. But with Long Island, it was like expected, like you were going to win every championship. You know, you could lose. You definitely, the first couple of years, we weren't getting to the championship, and it was like, wow, we got to do something. Mark came on the team, Mark Millen in 94, and that sort of propelled us. You know, we beat a very good Mount Washington team, and then he went on to their team, you know, and they squashed us in 95. And then that's when, you know, again, you guys come on in 96. And I think not many people gave us much of a chance to beat Toyota with the Gates and Mark Millen and the Wades and everybody else they had. You know, that's the famous keep it close game, you know. And
the referee told that story to Vinny.
Yeah.
What are you guys doing out here?
Well, you know, look, the one thing I think you recognized right away, Darren, I think you actually recognized it when you played against us, that we really kept each other accountable and playing for long. It wasn't for everybody because we had some guys come on the team that were really good players and they just didn't like.
They couldn't handle competition. Just say it.
It wasn't a competition. We could get negative sometimes. You know, if a guy
They had to handle it
a little bit.
We yelled at each other a lot, you know, on the field.
The ball was up here, Vinny.
Some guys can't handle getting yelled at, and it was like, forget it. But you know, it happened from the best guy to the worst guy. It wasn't like we singled out guys who weren't good. Made a bad play, whether it was me or Darren or Steven or anybody who made a bad play, or Sal let a goal in that we thought was a little weak. You know, we let them know about it. We'd say, come on, get yourself together here.
One of the great stories with that was one time it was getting a little crazy with all of the yelling and John Phillips, another rest in peace, great John Phillips. He says, you know, we're in the huddle before a game. It's at Hofstra, and he says, can't be negative. Let's try. Everybody's sitting there. We're all going to be positive. We're going to be positive today. We're just going to be positive. So Joe Corello goes out. He wins the opening faceoff. We get it. We move it around. It goes behind for Darren. He throws a feed into Blake Miller. He drops the ball. He goes, get him off the field. I said, that lasted all of about 10 seconds.
Did you ever play on a team like that before, Darren, that was that way?
I don't know. I don't think I could have expressed myself as well on other teams like I did, but you know, that was listen, like you talk about holding yourself accountable. Smalley, you're a math guy, right?
Yep.
1 year playing for Long Island, we had over 100% percentage on man up because you could score, call timeout, the penalty didn't release, and you could win the faceoff, call timeout, get your man up back on, and we would use our timeouts and score 3 times on man up.
Oh, that's crazy. That's good, man.
Yeah,
and
we were pretty automatic.
Like you think about like the IQ and how people molded to that, right? Like, you know, today I watch like high school games and like you see a zone where somebody's face guarded in the crease. Like, just put a second guy on the crease on offense. Like, who are you going to face guard?
Yeah.
And our guys picked that up so fast, and you know, I remember watching in summer league, Vinny and Steven do the flip or the fake flip up top on the crossover, the back pass, and somebody else would be out of position, and it was one pass away from a shot.
Well, we've had our moments too, John. I remember John Phillips. Vin, you remember one time we were blowing up at each other at North Hempstead? I was losing my mind. Vinny was right, of course. I give him credit. He was ultimately right. It was not, but we were going at it. And what was John saying, Vin? John was like,
No, John. No, the better one was we were playing Brine up near at like a midway point. We met them to play, and we were on an extra man. And you were looking at the goal. You were on the left side. I was playing the left hand side, and I was mad at you from the play before. So I said, "Throw it down the field. Why are you holding the ball?" And then they blew the whistle for the extra man play, and you had the ball. You threw it really hard at me, and you started, and I caught it. And then I threw it back at you hard. Like we threw it back and forth. And the guy who was the defender who had to come back and forth, he said, "Stop yelling at each other. You're brothers." He said in the middle of the game. Yeah, I thought that was hysterical. Just funny things. But like in the heat of battle, we used to all go at it. But like I said, it wasn't for the week because we actually had guys who came onto the team that were really good, but they couldn't. They were like, "I'm not playing on this team next year."
I used to hear him on the sideline talking.
Yeah.
I'm leaving this team to go to this team. I used to hear him.
Yeah.
Listen,
well,
Vinny did make fun of us though a little bit.
No, but the guys who really wanted to win and the guys who really wanted to learn and learn how to play with each other, they just accepted that. They let it roll off. It was nothing personal after the game. We were all friends. We never held grudges over it, but it's just different guys take it in different ways.
Well, you didn't hold a grudge, but the guys that left the team,
Maybe
they didn't like it.
Yeah, maybe the guys who left the team did.
I'm not going to name names. I heard it on the side. They did not like it.
So
and you guys were getting too much playing time.
But here, I'll give you one. So we end up when Darren and Kevin come on the team, and we have Pineda on attack with them, and we're so thin, and we playing in the championship game, and basically 15 guys maybe sort of field that day. 15 says, it's not like we had depth, but why do we not have that depth? Because guys were like, if I go play for Long Island, I might not play that much. They got intimidated to come and play on our team because they weren't sure what kind of playing time they would get. So they played, which is fine. I'm not knocking it. It's club lacrosse. Nobody was making a living doing it. But we took it maybe more seriously than these other teams. And that's why we won, because we did take it so seriously. And guys had goals to, play their way onto the USA teams and do that, because that was really the height of it at that point. There was no pro league or anything. So
we also had guys that didn't have those full aspirations, but were really under the radar, like a Tommy Naglieri. He really helped us, and he was a guy that could deal with all of the craziness.
Yeah.
And he fit in perfectly with our group, and he was very effective for us.
And I'll tell you,
we had different guys like that.
Josh Kenny, who passed away also.
Josh
Kenny was a D3 player, played with all these guys, were D1 All-Americans, and he took it every game. But I remember seeing him a couple years after finished playing and embracing him with the biggest hug. The experience I knew he had in winning and winning with us was pretty incredible. Those bonds, they never left,
Yeah. Guy like him, guy like Coleman.
Exactly.
How about the one year when we were very thin at midfield and Joe Ducks got Chris Connor to come play with us. He was a good player at Maryland, but to be on guys were looking from the other teams. Chris Connor's playing on your second midfield. They didn't think he was good enough, maybe, whatever. But he was great with us. He came on the team. He said, "Hey, I'll get my shot," because other guys were afraid to come play for these guys. And he got a lot of time, and I think he was on a team that won a championship.
Yeah. And his kids are at Colgate.
Yeah, they're tearing it up. They're doing great, the two boys. Yeah.
How about Greg Malfa? He scored maybe the biggest goal in the history of Long Island lacrosse in the semi.
Malfa, that was Reed Jackson's guy. He used to drive him into practice and games.
And he's fresh. He's fresh.
He's fresh. Yeah, it was a unique situation, and, it made it a lot of fun. And then, of course, there were different guys that, from that team, like yourself, you, Kevin, Reed, Dito, Sal, went on to the Blake, went on to the U.S. team and were real integral parts of, winning world championships, which Long Island was always that way.
You also won, Darren. You also, maybe tell us about this. You won the year that we had to make that choice, and many of us chose to play in the MLL. Long Island won the club championship that year.
Yes, we won that year. And like guys like Jim McAlevey, who were unbelievable Long Island lacrosse attackmen, played at UMass, kind of came out of retirement. Cummings came out of retirement, Cornell legend,
Right.
like play with us because Vinny, you're right. Like they probably wouldn't have played with the group that was there, the institutional group.
Right.
But they came out and they showed up in those games. I think McAlevey had like 3 goals in the final. Like those things were awesome, but yeah, like I think sometimes we walked on the field with the Long Island Blue and we were 3 goals ahead before we got off the bus.
So you really had 2 real unique experience playing for the national team, the 98, scoring the winning goal, doing all of that, but then also to play with your brother, that had to be special, and playing in Australia where your father won, that's it's storybook stuff,
I'd like to think of myself as being a pretty good passer, but the last pass I ever threw was the best one. Laying on the ground, throwing a backhand pass to my brother who ran the end line, trying to run timeout to win the world championship. Like I could see his legs moving, and like, the ball, he didn't keep the ball. He got double teamed and lost and they threw it down the end. But as soon as the clocks ran out, we ran over to each other. And, the first thing both of us said was, I love you.
Right.
Like pretty, you don't get to do that much in life.
Who's older? I'm sorry, I didn't know who was older.
I'm older.
The other thing I think it's important to talk about, and we haven't talked about this yet, and I think this might have been one of the biggest pieces of elevating Darren's game to another level was, there was always the not when I came out of school, I was playing indoor, playing in the Saints, and there was always the thing like they were talking about it. They were saying, yeah, Darren Lowe's going to play. Yeah, Darren Lowe's going to get knocked around. He's not tough. He's not this. Darren Lowe came and was as tough and good as any indoor player and still could feed the ball. And I think it particularly helped with your shooting.
Yeah.
And I think your game changed and even your dodging and confidence a little bit with that. I think indoor brought your game to a different level that was able to, through those years of 96, 97, 98, and all of your success. I think indoor had a lot to do with it. And that's why I always tell kids now, I go, if the kids coming out of college, if they do have I know there's less opportunity for them to play in the pro leagues now, maybe because the teams are scattered and there's not as many as it seemed like when we came out and it was right here. That experience of playing indoor, I know it dramatically helped me. I could see it helped you. I think it's a big piece of becoming the best version of a lacrosse player you could become.
Without question. Like, I think the picking up ground ball, playing defense against guys in practice, because you have to play defense, you learn more offensive moves. And I think I became a better initiator to score in the outdoor game once I did that. And then the shooting itself, like you realize how hard it is to score, and you spend those 3 months playing that way shooting, and then you go by a 6x6, from a 4x4. I think one year in Vail when we left indoor, Steve, and I think I shot 100% and had like 13 goals in that tournament on 13 shots, just because they weren't far shots, they weren't rockets, as Rick Beardsley used to tell me. They're pellet guns, BB guns, not howitzers. But you place the ball and you do it quick with no pocket in your stick. You can't pick up the ball.
And then the technology a little bit changed because you could still play with a quick release, but the pockets could get a little bigger and still have sort of that same effect with the technology as the sticks evolved a little bit too.
No question. Yeah, I don't think I've used offset head until I played indoor.
Right.
2 guys that I played with that were pretty much, Postel was pretty straight overhand, going back to Tommy. But the 2 guys that, played on the world team, that Matt, your styles kind of matched in terms of your shooting and pocket size and all of that. You and Brad Kotz. Kotze was an amazing shooter. I don't know what it was, that straight overhand that he had, that goalies just never seemed to get a read on his shot. He had speed on it, but he was deadly accurate. He was a phenomenal. But you had the same kind of, straight overhand type. I don't remember you. I try to think about you shooting underhand or anything. I don't remember you ever really shooting a shot underhand.
No. Like, do you think about like those the indoor experience? Like, I became a better rider. I think one of the reasons, the criticism I took from not making the U.S. team in 1994 was they didn't think I was a good enough rider, versus some of the other guys. I'm like, I think I'm as good as an athlete as anybody else. And the indoor really helped my riding and be more aggressive and connect in spots that were, more valuable. And plus, when I switched to Long Island, we were just smarter where we, IQ wise in the back, moving around, like how the plays were defended, when openings were available for the defenseman running up, that made more opportunity for us to take the ball away or create pressure. And if we turned it over, we were getting a goal, So I think that criticism of me went away going into the next world team tryouts, that, I wasn't a good rider or good enough athlete. And it's the inverse of my father. If you talk to my dad about his career, he blew out his knee and it made him a feeder. He was always just a straight line dodger. So he had to become a feeder. And I think a lot of the things he taught us in the backyard, the step away, the turn, we call it big boy, where you run back and forth 6 times, you exhaust the defenseman and you turn and somebody's open. It's not the first cut, it's the second cut or whatever it might be, or the spot feed.
Right.
Time to have your hands free. All those types of things, I learned in the backyard with my.
Yeah. What's interesting is those things never change. As much as the game might, people say, change, those little things like you're talking about, that's what I try to stress to kids, that as much as it might look different, it's really the same. The principles are the same in the game, the give and go, how to pick up a ground ball with a guy on your hip who's checking you. All those fundamental things that, look so different, they're really not that different.
I watched my 6th grade son in the 8th grade lacrosse game the other day go to the end line, pick the ball up. He's left-handed, pick it up in his right hand. And then the guy covered him to go righty. He splits lefty, takes his time, runs hard to a spot where the openings are backside, doesn't throw to the first guy who's open, comes a little wider and throws it backside to a kid scoring a goal. And I'm like, as a dad, I'm like, oh my God, those are things in the backyard my father taught me. But like, they're not natural. They're natural, but you got to tell somebody when you go to the end line, pick it up with your other hand. You run over the midfield line, clearing the ball. If you're a righty, put it in your left hand so someone guards you to go lefty so you can split righty. Don't throw the ball 40 yards with your weak hand. Throw it with your strong hand and end up in the spot where your ball, like I watch the good college players now. They play with their weak hand just enough to give themselves the strong hand advantage. The ones who don't initiate and make plays don't do that enough. That's been the same for 50 years.
Well, wasn't it your father who used to say about working on your weak hand? Or if you were righty, you say, you better work on your offhand or left hand. Most guys were righties. You better work on your left hand. If you don't have a left hand, you better learn how to play the oboe. Every band needs a good oboe player because you won't play lacrosse. You better have the other hand.
He's like, Harvard needs an oboe player.
Now, let me ask you this, because, I know you're a student of the game. You played with very high IQ. You're athletic. You've had tremendous success at every level. You're coming off a world championship. You won numerous club championships, the whole bit. And you were able to unplug, unlike some lunatics like me and my brother. You were able to unplug from lacrosse, do other things, be involved in U.S. lacrosse and, promoting the game that way, coaching. You went on that, that side of it, being that. Do you ever miss really playing? So you haven't, from what I know, I don't think you played after 2002, right?
That's a crazy question, Vinny. Come on. Go ahead, let him answer.
I had so much respect for the process, the running around, doing 3 or 4 miles before work, getting into my desk at 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning on Wall Street, working till 6, going home and shooting balls. I also know people probably wanted to kick the crap out of me, if I was going to slow down. That's one. But I think there were other things that I knew in life that I wanted to kind of tackle. And like right now, the role I have at USA Lacrosse is like a fulfilling part of giving back. And I'm serving the game in a different capacity. Having worked on the US national team since 2015 and running that committee, it's pretty unbelievable. Like, if you can imagine the joy I've had in the last few years when I got to call Andy Shea and tell him he was the coach of the USA team in the sixes, the conversation with him, the emotion that he had on the phone, just the two of us, two grown men crying, right? He gets to represent the United States, calling Seth Tierney, calling Connor Busick, letting him know he's going to be the offense corner, those types of things. That's been amazing. And then sitting in the room as a kid makes the team, at a tryout facility or gets notified, you get to watch it and you get to hear it. John Danowski and Joe Amplo did an amazing job kind of bringing that out in those kids. And I think that putting a stick in kids' hands and working on the corporation side, like I think it's more business that I'm involved in, because I'm not involved in the day-to-day USA Lacrosse stuff other than the national teams, which is the committee I run as a board member. But being the vice chair and chair in waiting going into the Olympics, like, I'm serving the sport in a way that, my father will be proud of. That's the way I look at it. Or, my brother will be honored by. And, my mother was married to the Team USA captain in 1974 and gave birth to a Team USA captain, right? No one's seen more lacrosse games than
Exactly.
How's that, Smalls? You like that?
You know what's funny? I have to admit, I'm starting to like Darren Lowe. I was not a big fan of his. I'll be honest. No, I didn't know it. It comes out funny, but I don't mean.
Oh, you won Smalley over. That's everything. Now your life is really complete, D'Lo.
No,
That's
I'm
it.
saying
You won Smalley over.
I never could finish my understanding. No, I like his background, where he came from. I thought he was a snotty-nosed kid that got to an Ivy League school. You didn't tell me his father was a teacher. I knew nothing about it till now. What he is.
Do you know Smalley? I gave a speech to the PLL players. Rachel Becker and Paul Rabel asked like if I would give a speech. It was like on financial security when they're done playing, and it was just the players pool and like Schreiber and Earhart are on, and they were talking about different things. I'm like, do you guys want me to talk about this, or do you want me to talk about like the networking you could do when you're done playing lacrosse? So back to your question, like how you unplugged. Well, I was competitive every day at my job, right? Like there was a scoreboard up every day. I was either going to fail, and I was scared shitless not to do my best every day, right?
But Darren, why were you driven to make money? See, that's another side. You're not a fireman. You didn't want to follow your father's track. Now here you are, a kid. You went to Brown. You snipped out a little fun, and you messing with. Now you're going into financing. Now you're making money.com. I mean, that's a big switch in the family tree.
I did the same in Wall Street that I did in lacrosse. I stopped at the highs. I retired 10 years ago, and a lot of people are like, you're crazy. You could keep making that amount of money. And I just felt like there was a different purpose. Like I felt like I had enough.
That's pretty cool, because I was going to ask you your net worth, but I won't do it because Vinny will yell at me.
So if you think about the net worth and stuff, like I looked at it, and in the speech I gave to the players, I was like, you just had your all-star game in San Jose.
Wow.
Who was on the sideline watching, like the parents of those kids. Your network just increased if you would have spent the time figuring out who they were. You could get a job anywhere in Silicon Valley because look at what you're doing here. Do something exceptional.
That's great. So you left finances, you made a few shekels, like they say in the old term, and now you're going back into, well, you got the USA, but aren't you coaching a little bit with your son? Yes.
coach a little bit, but like I love being the third or fourth assistant and working on the tactical stuff. I don't
I think that's a good idea. I don't never think it's a good idea coaching your son after 12 to 15 years old.
So
That's my opinion.
Smalley, you saw my older son play golf, right? Like I watch him, and it's basically a different animal because you're on your own for 18 holes.
Amazing.
It doesn't end until the last.
What's his first name again?
Carson. But Carson's coach is Martin Hall, on the Golf Channel, and he tells me all the time. He told me he almost chose Carson on the range at 9 because he saw me how I acted with him, that I wasn't overbearing, and he was someone that he could deal with as a parent. He could choose anybody to work with, and it's been great watching Carson, that relationship. I don't have the backside look in lacrosse to offer on his.
But I saw the joy you had watching him. When he missed a shot.
But
he missed the shot and he never wavered. The kid kept the same face as he did when he hit a shot right to the hole. That's big in golf. You can never waver. You hit a bad shot, you get up next to it. And that's what I saw in Carson. I like him.
Yeah,
Tell him I said hello too. I want to.
All those disciplines and what I watch, like I'm so proud.
Huge.
I'm so proud of him as a dad, going through down to that process, and he's in the middle of it. So like all those things, like you go back to, I kind of see it at times where, you got to go back to the time where you're in Mineola and you lost 20-4 to Manhasset. And what are you going to do the next year to get ready to beat them 13-12 in overtime? And are you going to show up, and are you going to bring someone along with you? Right.
A lot of good lessons there, I'll tell you.
Well, that same skill set or mentality, I should say, from lacrosse carried into your professional career.
Wow, so you did it all. What's left in your career? You going to jump out of an airplane or something crazy?
I think that watching this USA Lacrosse thing, this is very satisfying because I think that, there was this perception USA Lacrosse was more dictating to what the sport should be doing. I think I sit in the boardroom and I listen, and anybody who listens to this, the reality is we are trying to serve the best interests of lacrosse in the club world, the college world, and in the youth world, and for men and women and boys and girls, and changing dynamics, putting a stick in someone's hand, and then supporting the national teams as the golden standard of one of those items. And instead of dictating, I've seen the transformation with the relationship with the college coaches like Kevin Corrigan and Bill Tierney. I brought the college coaches back into the network. So when I looked at the women's pool of who applied to be the senior women's national team coach, there were like 50 people who applied. Like maybe like 15 years ago, it would have been 3 or 4.
Right.
It's because there's renewed engagement. So I'm finding fulfillment. Like, what will that look like, Smalley? 50 years will judge the work I'm doing on that, not the next 5 years. And so you have to think about that as, our chair, Sarah Bullard McDaniel, we'll talk about it. You have to think about it like a founding father. You have to.
I like what you're doing. You're giving back. You're giving back. That's so much more important than even what you've done in the sport. That's the way I feel. What you're giving back now to society, your kids, and the whole culture, raising money. It's amazing.
Yeah, and yes, but it's also selfish. Like philanthropy is selfish. It makes you feel good, right? So it makes me feel good doing that. And
it's great.
Like, my father, Doc Doherty, like Howie Borkin, Billy Redmond, in the basement of my house growing up, started the New York Metropolitan Lacrosse Foundation. And, we go to that Hall of Fame dinner every year and you see who's in it. It's like a who's who, but like those guys were pioneers to it. And my dad was a big part of it. He ran the first ever under 19 USA World Games, the Junior World Games. And he did it in, when I was, a sophomore in college. And then he ran those Long Island lacrosse camps forever. And those weren't money makers, but I think that relationship with USA Lacrosse, going back,
really cool.
The embracing the club network, is really important because those guys, yes, they're great businesses for them, but they do have the opportunity to grow the game. And then trying to figure out how rec comes in and using sixes to put more touches in kids' hands. So the 11th kid on the team doesn't just stand there and hope to catch the ball once a game, touch it 7 times a game. And all those things matter,
Hey, Darren, your actual job, so tell the fans here, your actual job duty now, you have a title with the USA Lacrosse, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm the vice chair of the executive board. Yes.
Are you part of the fundraising, or you're more on the
Well,
athletic side with the
there's a
team?
foundation board, but that's all part of, encompassing being a board member for anything, any 501c3, that would be part of it. But, my job is I don't have one. I try to stay out of my wife's way and raising the kids. And, I love looking at types of things, in the investment world every day. I love to read, and we'll figure it out as I go.
Well, you got a lot of time on your hand. You're a young kid. You're 50-something years old. Maybe you'll be an astronaut. Maybe you're going up with Musk in the air to it. You never know.
Astronaut.
No, don't laugh, Vinny.
No, we want you to be an astronaut.
Yes,
So
that
we're
would
gonna
be.
shoot
I
you
That
told
would be
Vinny
what
one
we
time.
want.
We're shooting you into space. If there is another species out there, we want them to see the finest we have from Earth, and that's you.
You see what I got to deal with, Darren? This guy got to deal with a friend. I had shortcomings growing up, and he's still giving it to me now. That's a good friend. God bless him.
You give it as well as you take it. Let me tell you that.
The three of you, which my kinship with the three of you is like, if someone asks you for a favor, you're going to go out of your way to get that
Yeah,
accomplished.
that's
Like,
true.
and there is Vinny and Steven have always talked about, like, there is this code, the code of, hey, someone does something for you, you got to give it back, and you got to give it back.
Yeah.
When you ask for the favor in return, you deliver that favor in return, right? Like, so all those things are like, that's a big part of the lacrosse world and the network. So, yeah, Smalley, the fundraising for USA Lacrosse, like, yes, when the Olympics were announced that it's an Olympic sport in Los Angeles, it unlocked funding for Canada and Australia from the governments, because now it's an Olympic sport.
So we gave money to the sport.
The U.S. does not
That's
have,
incredible.
so we have to go do that through corporate sponsorships and elevating those conversations that we're having. And I'm trying to do my part to inject myself wherever it's appropriate, or when it's not appropriate, find the right person
That's
to
cool.
do it. Like, and that would be the sense that I would have learned working on Wall Street in those rooms with all those smart people smarter than me.
Darren, I have something nice to tell you before I forget, because my mind really loves it. It's like a Ferris wheel. Just something very nice with these two young men. I do get on them a lot. I'm on them like they're my students, but they both
Like
love
a
you.
hamster wheel, but go ahead.
Thank you, Vinny, for the. So I have to give Vinny a compliment. I mean, if anybody loves a player, I've seen a lot of players. I know all the names. I've listened to all the names. He really loves you as a friend and a person. Every time I was on with him, this guy, who's calling? This guy, Darren. He's off on one ring. He hangs up. I said, who the hell's this guy, Darren, Vinny? But he says, it's Darren Lowe. Well, I says, is he any kind of player? Do I have to pick him to get him on the in the Hall of Fame? No, Smalls, he's already in, whatever. He give the act. He jumped right up the phone. I got to talk to Darren. But no, he always, the way Vinny spoke about you and the way your father and everything, it's just a greatness to him of what he is. I don't know how to articulate all the stuff, whatever, but the person and what he does, and even Steve and the way they talk about you, you're a friend of mine now. I mean, it's great. It's just something.
If you want to keep things in perspective, their dad worked in Washington, D.C. away from them, but didn't miss many games, And so for a year, I reverse commuted from Florida to New York to continue working. And so, like, some of my template was what Mr. Sombrado had done. I watched and I learned.
Yeah.
But I also knew that he didn't want to be far away, like he didn't miss. He'd be at a club game in somewhere in Philadelphia and catch the train down to DC to go to work on Monday.
Fall for the mailman, for the average person in America to get ahead, to be able to buy a house in the early 70s. When my father was a mailman, he bought a house, Joe Smalley,
So
Levittown, Long Island.
If you don't know, like, my mother-in-law was a mail carrier, right? So, like, she knows who Mr. Sombrado is. And I think that those are types of things, like, through osmosis and growing up in that household with their mom too, with, all their brothers and sisters and their nephews, the way they act and behave. It's all part of that code of being proper.
Yeah.
And Vinny and Steven,
keeping everybody accountable.
Vinny and Steven, I've learned so much about life from Vinny and Steven, not just lacrosse and all those experiences, that, someone else will be affected by that someday just because I've been friendly and watched them. And I try to incorporate those types of things in life, Smalley. That it's pretty special.
Well, the truth
They're
is,
they're very unique in a world where you just have to watch them, and we'd be much better if everybody acted like it.
well, I
That's true.
appreciate
That's why I say I'm
That's
great.
very nice.
but we've been very blessed that we have like-minded guys that we played with, and like I said, the best thing about the sport that I always found was like the friendships that you make and all of that. And then it's like, we have guys you don't see 20 years and you'll see them and it was like you saw them yesterday. It's
You're right
crazy
about
the way
that.
that is because of the memory, the games, and we start replaying things in our head and off the field, on the field, how their families are doing, their kids now. We get excited about watching their kids play and grandkids even for some guys. And it's, that's why I say, when they call the Native Americans call it the medicine game, there's definitely something to that. The beauty of the sport and the relationships and all it brings. If we were lucky enough that we rose to high levels in the sport, so we got to see it at its peak, and obviously people know who you are and in the game and all. But I just tell these guys who play today at whatever level, just enjoy it for the time you're doing it. Make the best of it. Maybe you're not going to be a world team guy. You're not going to be an All-American or play even on a Division I school. But it's like 1% of athletes play college sports anyway.
Yeah.
So if you have fun doing it,
we definitely enjoyed it. Me and Darren were out enjoying it. Vin. You were back in your room, maybe with Gordon Purdy or whoever, but me and Darren were out enjoying it.
Yeah,
And it was weird, right?
We lived it.
But
Vinny
you got to
never went
remember,
outside
I
his
had a lot of
room.
years before that than you guys.
You did. But then it came a
Believe me,
time.
I didn't get shorted.
I know. But there was a time, Smalls, Vinny was getting those milkshakes. And me and Darren were out all night. We were out all night.
Yeah, the whole team, they would hide what they were doing from me.
Vinny knew what time everybody got in that night.
When
exactly
we got to the hotels, they liked hanging out with me because we would I'd find a good restaurant to go eat.
No
but
question.
Then after the game, forget it. They were ditching me because I was going to bring them down. They had things to do. So they went on their own after that, and I went home to sleep.
I think Vinny had to get, we were always roommates, but I think Vinny had to get Pat as a roommate at one point.
At one point, I just had no roommate.
Yeah, because we weren't coming home.
Pat came home? Pat didn't come home.
Well, Pat was married, and then so he would go right back.
So then he wanted to
go get their milkshakes, and me and Darren would be out, and it was that was quite adventurous.
It's just so funny that I stayed in the game so long that I saw those different stages of guys.
Right.
Guys who came out were like, couldn't wait for the game. When the game was over to get dressed and go out and hit the bars, whatever. And then they played long enough. Now they got married and maybe had a kid or two. And their whole perspective changed, which is the hardest part about playing a long time. How we saw Smalls and I saw Rob Pennell yesterday. We went over to the Chaminade game. And he knows it's winding down for him. He's still playing. He's playing for the Whip Snakes now. He got traded to the Whip Snakes. He's looking forward to it. He's in great shape. And I have no doubt he'll still play at a high level. But, his thing, life's changing fast for him now. He's more into the business, working with his Uncle Jim and Metzger. And then, of course, now he's really a senior statesman on these teams. It's funny how you go from like being the youngest guy on the team to being a senior statesman, and so it's not, guys ask me about different guys, is that guy I said, look, when you're so good at something, it's not easy to give it up, and the fun you have it. That's why I say I appreciate the guys who are able to unplug. And I know many of them who are very high level players who don't, they had their fill, they're onto things. And like you said, they're of service to the game in different ways. And that's that's their choice too. I think it's great that everybody has that ability to choose what's right for them.
It's amazing. Like even how your network changes or how it develops. Like most of the college coaches are people we've either played with or seen or friends with. Whenever you talk to a family who was like, a kid wants to get recruited by Joe Bresci, John Torpy, Andy Shea, Connor Busick, like their families.
Right.
So you're not going to put someone to them that isn't going to make them valuable for their jobs and their livelihoods, or the parents aren't going to behave properly being the 27th kid on the roster when only 15 play, right? So all those things, I know that, I hear it all the time. Vinny is someone that makes that phone call or gets those calls all the time. And it's honored by the example of a Rob Pennell and, how he did and
right.
And how those kids perform when they get there and how their parents act and how Hollywood supports and all those types of things are pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, parents can't lose that, right? You just don't get to a place. I heard an example yesterday that, one college team has a 55 person roster and 15 kids have played the majority of the year so far.
Yeah.
And what are the other 30 kids doing? Like, you have to have a great experience. So there's got to be other things you're doing.
Right.
Well, I think we're getting close to the shout outs. We do our shout out each week. You want me to go first, Vin?
Well, it's either you or me because he disappeared.
The Invisible Man? What about the Invisible Man? What else can we talk about in his room there?
I guess he went on strike. He's looking for more money.
Right. He just disappeared on us.
Yeah. Go ahead. You start with the shout out.
My shout out this week is going to go out to my brother-in-laws, John and Jeff, and all the boys who opened up. I think it's opening up today officially. Dave's Hot Chicken. You see the little logo. We got a little logo out for Dave's Hot Chicken in Carl Place, and in Middle Village there's another one. And we were out last night having some Dave's Chicken. It was outstanding. What a place. I mean, it's right in the heart, right off Glen Cove Road, close to Old Country Road. It's really, really good.
Yeah.
So I'm wishing them the best of luck. We had a good time. Smalley went in there and ordered like he thought he was Chef Ramsay on. He basically was like, I'll have one of everything. At first, he didn't know what to order, and then he turned to, well, I'll have that, and then I'll have those poppers, and I'll have the mac and cheese. He went down. I'm giving my shout out. The Invisible Man disappeared, and my shout out was to the boys and John and Jeff at Dave's, and to encourage people get out to get some chicken at Dave's. And I said, you pretty much ordered everything on the menu.
I did, yeah. The mac and cheese was good. The little chicken fingers, the way they did it, it's like, place is amazing.
Give us your shout out, Smalls.
Well, I got this in the mail. I don't know if I ever showed you guys this stuff. Can you see this?
Yeah.
You know what it is?
Maryland helmet.
I remember that.
Coach Tillman had sent me this gift package, whatever. I never really revealed it to you guys. That was it. So, look, it's a Maryland hat. I thought it was really nice. He said he found me the biggest helmet. But I went to try it on, and it don't even.
No, don't. You're gonna hurt yourself.
That's all I could get.
I knew it wasn't gonna work.
I'm 8.25. You know how when you size your head, these things are only cut the biggest size for like 7.5.
He needs the bucket.
So anybody out there that has some sort of helmet that could fit Smalley,
the old ones.
He said if he got a helmet, he would play this summer at Placid. He would go out and take a face-off. So there's the challenge to all the fans out there. If it's like choosing how many marbles or jelly beans are in the jar. If you can find a helmet that could fit Smalley, he's coming out and playing in Placid.
How about the guy, Ron? You know Ronnie Frazier?
Oh, yeah.
You know, that's a good friend of mine. He has a helmet.
He's a good friend of his.
Vinny, right? Well, tell him the size of the helmet, Frazier.
Yeah, you need the Ronnie Frazier helmet.
You do need that.
You remember the old helmets with the tie in the back? It has a little tie. That's what you got to have because it can fit any size head or whatever. I don't know if they're legal now.
You know, I think this may be the first episode that we really didn't talk about college lacrosse. We had an entertaining time talking to Darren,
Yeah,
right?
we're still disappointed with the fact that Smalley somehow is in the lead in the picks.
Oh, he's a master.
Oh,
He's a
they
master.
haven't
That's why
said
we're not
anything.
talking about it.
They
That's
called
why.
me cheater. They called me
He's Rain
second
Man.
year in
He's
a row.
Rain Man of the picks. He's the Rain Man of the picks. No question about it.
Fantastic.
Oh, I'm just trying to get to 500. I'm still
Where-
about 3 games below.
So who's your shout out, Smalls?
Well, I learned about somebody. You guys might know more about it. I was just doing a little research. Can you see this shirt? It's going to be to this young man.
Oh, yeah.
who
Definitely.
Brendan
passed
Looney.
on. Okay, and my quote for today is this.
Never
Exactly.
complain. There you go.
Exactly.
No,
I
never
like
complain
that.
because
I like that.
not every kid has dealt with the same things and issues. As you know, growing up, I had a lot of issues. I know Vinny likes to laugh, but I couldn't study. I couldn't mentally study. And I come from people, and Vinny knows, is tremendous peers, graduates of all the Naval Academy and Army and all the big colleges, everything. And I just never was able to get through and get to the other side. So my father had a little plan for me to go back to college, right, Vin?
Yeah.
And try out for the team. I could barely pass. I was able to win a national championship with in lacrosse. I never played the sport, but I won the mile, and I won a national championship. So all the kids out there, just keep fighting hard. No, keep believing in yourself, like he did. He came from nowhere too. You know, he came out of he's a world player. All you guys, you know, you have to fight to get to the top any way you can. And my shout out actually is to the young man, and also someday Coach Tillman, I believe one day, hopefully, if he ever gets a chance, because he's a passionate guy in the game, got to know him real well. He actually offered me to carry the flag out in the game one day, but I got nervous. I couldn't do it. They were playing Syracuse. I said, I can't do this or whatever. I got nervous, you know, because I got a friend named Fish. He knows who he is. He owns a fish company. And I always get my fish from him. His Mike Leo, and his son plays. I figured I wouldn't get fish anymore. My mom wouldn't get fish. I said, I can't carry the flag, you know?
Oh, my God.
But a shout out to Tillman, and hopefully one day they'll give him a look to coach the USA team, because I know that's in his repertoire. How do you say that, Vinny? Repertoire?
Yeah, repertoire. That's it. Repertoire.
But anyway, that's it. That's my shout out. And
Vin, who do you got?
My shout out is going to the other set of Low boys, Carson and Lucas.
Yeah.
They're doing their thing down in Florida. The boys are going. Yeah, I saw little highlights of Lucas playing lacrosse. He looks good. Looks like he's got high IQ like his dad. Saw him throw a couple spot feeds. Saw him drag the guy away from the cage, run by him. And not to mention that he's playing 2 grades up. So we're going to be keeping an eye on you, Lucas. Keep it going.
Love it. I love it. And of course,
yeah, as
Darren.
one comment said, he's a great 2031 who will be a 2034.
There you go.
Who do you got as your shout out, Darren?
anybody, Darren, doesn't have to be any.
So a shout out to my mom, because she's someone who I kind of
Another goat, the
She's
greatest.
the goat.
goat.
She is the goat.
You know, I have to give one that I was told, like, to Hildebrands. May we all meet at Hildebrands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I miss Williston Park, and I miss the ice cream. And Steven, you know, like, the Friendlies is great, but
No.
What's your favorite ice cream? Darren, what's your favorite?
I'll have any of the like raspberry sorbet or something at Hildebrands, but chocolate is my ice cream typically, with the rainbow sprinkles with the regular cone. I miss home that way, and the bagels there.
Yeah.
Living in Florida, it is the 6th borough of New York here in West Palm Beach.
Yeah.
To my roots in Long Island, it is my shout out, because
Yeah. But just to let you know, Hildebrands is under new ownership, and they fixed the place. It looks great. The food's great. They didn't change, they just upgraded things. It's still
kept the same outside, the
mole pits, the
historical
whole bit,
1920 Hillebrand
it's-
sign, which is cool.
It's nice. You when you get back here one time, we'll have to go.
Yeah. So my mom went to elementary school around the corner from Hildebrands, walked home, and I grew up next to my grandparents.
Wow.
And every day from elementary school, we walked home.
Wow.
I had to sneak in there.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's cool. Right down the block there. I know it. Yeah.
You're my new guy, Darren. I actually like you now. My new guy, Billy. This is unbelievable.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have you. It's great seeing you again. Obviously, we talk, but for the fans out there, Darren is not only a great player and giving great contributions to the game. He's just is a great friend to have. I've always treasured that about him. For the fans, we're getting our picks up there. Smalley's on a tear. Keep looking in the Instagram stories. We'll have to see this week. A lot of big games this week. Some Big Ten games. A lot of implications. I don't know what game we might make.
Steven, I got to put Darren on the spot for one little thing, and I got to do it.
Go ahead.
Darren, I call it the game of the century because I always hype things up. Gary Gate is one of my favorite players of all time with his brother Paul, what they did for the game. But they're going to be here next weekend, next weekend, coming up on a Saturday. And we got Goldstein, who's a dear new friend of mine. I'm a little torn who to pick. If I pick one guy, I don't get the fish. I pick the other guy. The Goldsteins will never invite me to an Ivy League game. I'm like a little nervous. It's a 1.5. Favorite is the Ivy League team. Cornell is favored by 1.5. If you're in my shoes, you shouldn't be listening to this, guys. Who would I go for? Now, I'm putting you on the spot because that's what we got to deal with every week. So now you know how great I am to make the picks. So meanwhile, I'm well over 500, and I'm going to jinx myself because I'll go down the tubes the next 3 weeks, and Vinny will take over by one game at the end.
Smalley, the Ancient Eight, I'm loyal to him. I never fade the Ancient Eight.
Ivy League.
I'm an Ivy League guy. There's nothing like Ivy League lacrosse.
So take the points.
Take the points.
Okay, let me put Steven on the spot. Steven, that's going to be we're not allowed to pick that game because it's in New York, and we don't really gamble. We tell the people we do the point spread, but we don't gamble on the games. We have to tell the people that, whatever. But I guess, Steven, that's going to be our one signature pick. Are you going to go with them?
Yeah, no,
Are you going to take the advice of Darren?
I'm going with Darren. I think
Wow.
Cornell might be too strong. They look strong right now. I mean, I'm not saying Syracuse couldn't win. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if they won, but
Vincenzo, you ain't eating fish. You go against fish. You won't get a lobster or fish for 2 years. You're done, Vinny. You're going to go with the Ivies. You're going to sell your soul, Vinny. Guys, sell it for the Darren.
Well,
I want to hear you sell your soul.
I think Cornell is playing at their best already. I think they're on a bit of a mission.
With
I
the
think-
it's
I
almost
think-
going to be
With the one, who's the favorite?
Cornell 1.5. I mean, it can't be 2.5. It's not going to be 2.5.
At 1.5, if you're asking me if I'm betting, I might have to bet Syracuse. I think it's going to be a 1-goal overtime.
I think it'd be like an overtime, Vin, like an overtime. Remember last year?
Yeah.
What's amazing is, it must be a major, major game because we're talking about it almost 3 weeks in advance. I mean, this could be. Smalley got invited to games this weekend. Notre Dame, Syracuse, North Carolina, Virginia. He's getting invitations everywhere. Guy is famous.
Yeah.
And then he disappears.
Yeah.
This is what we have to deal with.
We thought we were going to be at the Final Four with St. John's this weekend. Unfortunately, that didn't happen.
He thought he was doing that too.
Darren, I got killed. I got to know Mike Rapoli on a good note. I said, Mike, please, before I go.
Forget all of this. We'll be here for another hour.
I know, but I told Mike, please, get me to a Final
I
Four.
got to work today. I got to go somewhere.
Vinny's got to work.
Yeah. Thank you for
Unbelievable.
coming on, D-Lo.
Thanks, Darren.
Great to have you.
Stick around. As we sign off, we'll see you next week.
We got our song, baby. Do it, Stevie.
Make sure we download it.